Our next speaker is Mr. Yaniv Shacham. He is the new media and campaigning manager of Peace Now, an Israeli settlement watchdog organization. For many years now, Mr. Shacham has been a political activist and has actively participated in a number of political campaigns for peace and social justice in Israel. A film director by profession, he has used this knowledge and experience to execute successful and viral political campaigns to influence public opinion in Israel. We very much appreciate your participation. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. As I said, my name is Yaniv, and I'm from the Peace Now movement. And I'm here to represent actually those Israelis who believe in peace, who fight for peace in Israel. I'm really used to talk to people in Israel, so this is a nice change for me to talk to the international community and show and express how many people in Israel do want peace and fight for it against the Israeli government. So again, thank you to all the organizers for inviting me to participate in this interesting meeting. The first thing I really like to show when I come to presentations like this is just so people will understand how Israel in this area is very, very small. Although there are conflicts that were solved in even smaller locations, but this is the same scale map, just to understand. And I know Ecuador is considered a small country in South America, but so you see how small Israel is inside. So it's nice to see how such a conflict that has tremendous effect on the world comes from a very, very small area in the world. So I am the new media manager and campaign manager in Peace Now movement in Israel. Peace Now is the leading voice of the Israeli public pressure for peace. We are the oldest peace NGO and a very famous one in Israel and even around the world, operating for more than 36 years to promote peace between Israel and its neighbors. We are a mass movement that was established 36 years ago during the peace process between Israel and Egypt. We began there pressuring peace between Israel and Egypt, and since then we are advocating for a two-state solution and trying to pressure the Israeli leadership to convince the Israeli public of the importance of a two-state solution. Our main message, this is important to understand to the Israeli public today, is that a two-state solution and peace is an Israeli interest and need, not less than it is a Palestinian interest, need, and right. Our main activities are distributing educational materials, campaigns, demonstrations on the street, conferences, of course, political debates, and a lot of work on the social media network, which is very, very popular and influencing in Israel. Settlement Watch Team, this is the most important material I'm going to show you here from our, one of the most important projects Peace Now has had in the last 20 years. Settlement Watch Team role and mission is to gather information and keep track of everything happening on the ground. We do it from the air, we do it from the ground, as you see. We are well known and regarded for our credibility and reliability. Our data and maps produced as a result of this have raised public awareness of the terrible price Israel is paying for these obstacles for peace. And we actually, a lot of our publications managed to prevent some of the expansions of the settlements and very bother the leadership of the right wing. We have a lot of achieving in the media, as you see. I'm very proud to say that the information we reveal gets reported all around the world and in Israel. And that's why we managed to disturb the leadership of the settlers who look at Peace Now as a cruel political enemy and troublemakers who try to stop their settlement enterprise and the occupation, and they probably hate everything we do and represent. So let's dive into the situation on the ground just to understand the basic facts. So this is how the West Bank looked, of course, in 1967, right after the Six-Day War. Those of you who don't know the deep data may get discouraged or depressed about the data I'm going to show you, but it's important to understand that in the second part of this presentation you see why, although the situation on the ground, peace is still available. So although the occupation following the war, Israel referred to the West Bank as occupied territories by its own law. Israel did not annex it in any stage and gave the Israeli army the responsibility of governing the land and the Palestinians who lived there. Now, this is what happens, this is all the dots, what happened 10 years later. Although the status, a decade later, as part of the defense border plan of Israel, the government began to encourage Israelis to move to settlements where mostly were built along the borders and especially in the Jordan Valley. In addition, we have the Gush Emunim movement, the national religious sector, who claimed the redemption of the historical Jewish biblical land and began to grow and settle in places like Hebron, Nablus, and more. But as seen, we are talking about only 4,000 settlers in 24 settlements in the first 10 years of the occupation. But what happened in '77 was the election where the right-wing government went up, and then you see all those black new dots. This is what happened in the right of the rise in '77 election, a tremendous momentum of building of new settlements in dozens of points all over the West Bank. This is a result of the ideological political settlements that national religious Israelis built and supported by the government in order to control more and more parts of the West Bank, alongside economic settlements with more secular character who moved there just to find a better and cheaper future. And this brings us to the situation of 120 settlements with 110 Israelis living behind the green line in dozens of points as you see on the map. And this is most up to date to 2012 since the Oslo Accords in 1993. And up to 2012, we see a huge leap of the amount of settlers moving to the existing settlements, expanding them widely, and building a few more new settlements. In addition, we see a lot of illegal outposts. So this brings us to the count updated to 2012, because the dates on 2013 will be published only on September this year. So we are talking about 341,000 settlers in 120 settlements and 96 outposts alongside some 2.5 million Palestinians. As said, this is not, I will talk about it of course, it's not including another 200,000 settlers living in Jewish neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. So just to see the great jump from 1993 to 2000, the number here is a little bit mixed up, but 341,000. And you can see what's very interesting, that 68% of those people living in the West Bank moved after Oslo. So it's interesting to see it because the majority of the settlers moved to settlement precisely in periods when there were actual political negotiations between Israelis and the Palestinians. Although there were some years of negotiations, freeze or settlement, many under Prime Minister Netanyahu and Sharon, there were a lot of discussions and stages of talks. Nevertheless, the Israeli government have used this umbrella to continue building under the argument and excuse that everything will be discussed and determined in the negotiation table. So there is no problem to continue building, at their point of view, expanding settlements under the excuse of natural growth of the settlers living there. What also happened during the Oslo Accord is which set the plans for an Israel withdrawal, who was supposed to end by 1999, and therefore divided the West Bank into A, B, C control areas. This created a situation where A and B are the areas under Palestinian authority, in 40% of the area only, and Area C under Israeli full control, which holds 60% of the West Bank. And the settlers are only 12% of that population, holding 60% of the West Bank. That is because of the expanded jurisdiction of the settlement, security reasons, and all access roads and highways leading to dozens of settlements in the West Bank, making the map we see today. Now, this is the situation. Pay attention. We have the Israeli settlements, we have the outposts, and we have, of course, the Palestinian areas. And this makes an impossible situation that actually created this dividing of Palestinian areas into many, many blocks or lungs with towns, cities, and villages that separated from each other. And by this point, preventing the possibility of a Palestinian territorial contiguity or continuity. So this brings us to the summary in numbers of what is happening today. Just what you can see on the right is just one example of our footage we take from the sky. A change of one example, short example, see the expansion of a settlement called Leshem from 2010 and how they spread all around the mountain by just 3 years. So we're talking about in the numbers, more than 14,000 housing units, most in the West Bank, and more than 3,000 construction tenders for housing units that were issued in 2003. And pay attention to some of the interesting information here that after the peace talks, this began. So although the umbrella of the talks, there still have been expansions and housing tenders. And this is what the ambassador before talked about, the rise of 123% since 2012, a huge jump to 2013, and this is not our information, this is the Statistic Bureau of Israel. So they give this very important numbers, and we see this great, significant, and depressing maybe, a jump. And the most up-to-date information I give you is recent for this March. And as you see, 1,933 tenders issued in the West Bank and East Jerusalem just in this few months, beginning of 2014. And just a little, even closer with a look at some major threats to the new state, to the two-state solution. You'll see soon how it looks on the greater map. But just to understand, I'm sure you've heard of these names. We have Ariel located 20 kilometers inside the West Bank, halfway between the Green Line and Jordan River. Israel annexation of Ariel would obstruct the establishment of a viable contiguous Palestinian state. We have E1. E1 is planning, not yet built, but if E1 would build, it will isolate East Jerusalem from the West Bank, preventing the development of a Palestinian political and economic capital in East Jerusalem. And Efrat, located south of Bethlehem, which also Israeli annexation of Efrat, would effectively isolate Bethlehem from the southern West Bank and leave it stuck between Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and Efrat. So here's how it looks, where it is in the West Bank. And just to summarize this part, we're talking about no clear definition. Even in the talks, we're not sure what they mean about these areas of Ariel, Ma'ir-1, Ma'ale Domim, and Gush Etzion and Efrat. It's called the pizza principle. Israel and the Palestinians are, if we look at it as a pizza tray, they're negotiating on the pizza. But Israel is keep on eating more and more pieces of the pizza, leaving the tray empty, so this causes a very difficult situation. But also a lot of people don't understand, especially in Israel, that the 1967 borders is a Palestinian compromise. And of course, if you're talking about the settlement blocks, this is a compromise, and some Israelis look at the blocks and why, it's part of our country. But of course, this is a compromise, sensitive areas in the blocks, and not blocks, but enclaves as we see it, and those are very major threats to this two-state solution. But, and this is the part where I want to, in the second half of this presentation, to show you that despite all the data, there are several possible reasons to those who study and know the subject to understand the reality on the ground did not stop the two-state agenda. And this struggle can be and must be completed in two states for two people. The Geneva Initiative possible solution is a reason for optimism. Fortunately, we have a pragmatic solution that can be achieved. For several years, a group of professional and recognized leadership, former Israeli and Palestinian, said and wrote a detailed agreement well known as the Geneva Initiative. And this could be the basis of a future pragmatic agreement. As we can see, the agreement agreed on both sides suggested that the absolute majority of the settlers will remain under Israel's sovereignty in those well-known settlement blocks and will not have to evacuate from their homes. The Palestinians, of course, will get alternative land in the land swaps based on 1-to-1 ratio. This means that only 23 to 35,000 households, some 85 to 100,000 settlers in small settlements deep in the West Bank and east of the future border will have to evacuate and move back to Israel. And all these settlements have less than 2,000 residents. Most have only 100 or a few dozen settlers deep in the West Bank and in the outposts. Now, this is also very interesting, and this is also a lot of the information that the leadership and even the government doesn't want the public and Israel and the world maybe to understand. That it's achievable because the important fact that the increase in the number of settlers since the Oslo Accords show that 64 of the increase was west of the future border as drawn under the Geneva maps. In addition, we see that 50% of the increase was in three large settlements of Modi'in Elit, Beitar Elit, and Ma'ale Domim seen in the map. All are in the agreed settlements block. So, against the settlers' leadership, political goals of making solid facts on the ground, they actually failed to strengthen the settlements deep in the West Bank. Another thing to prove this point is what happened in the Jordan Valley, where that made some headlines lately, if you heard about the desire of some right-wing parliament members to annex, where the number of settlers actually decreased. Emmanuel, another ultra-Orthodox city like Modi'in Elite, but in the Beitar Elite, that were actually failed and didn't succeed as settlements like the other Orthodox religious settlements that are in the settlement blocks. This is just to see what kind of population are in those areas. So you see that the real ideological political settlers, 24% are from the national religious settlements. There are also people in the mixed religious and secular settlements, but this is maybe the most problematic group that will fight and be against this. And this is very important to see. You see those three cakes. First of all, as I said before, 12% settlers, 88% Palestinians. The percentage of the settlers out of the total Israeli population, and I'm always shocked telling people they are only 4% of the Israeli population. They make a lot of noise, especially in Israel, but they're only 4%. And the percentage of settlers who need to be moved as part of the agreement are only 1.9% of the Israeli population. So this might be the best proof, given the right leadership, brave enough to lead for a two-state solution. This act will be possible and not blocked because of the numbers that the settlers are trying to report or mislead the Israeli public and the world. And this is also very important public opinion. The public is still in favor in every poll we make, not only in Peace Now, international polls, researchers, polls and surveys. The public is still in favor of political settlement or agreement. If such an agreement will secure the safety of Israel and ensure the continuing existence of Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state. That is what the vast majority of the Israelis really want. They are afraid, they are pessimistic, some of them are tired of this conflict and don't believe in a solution. But they still want to leave the occupied territories and finally draw the official borders of Israel that will be accepted by the international community. So you see here the number. Initially we have 50, I'm talking about the Israeli, you can see also the Palestinian numbers, but the Israelis are 54% initially, and if the Palestinians will accept, we have a great majority, and of course if any prime minister will bring this agreement to the public, it will be much more effective. Another important point to understand about the Israeli society is that the settlers have not able to settle in the hearts, as they say. Their vision of a greater Israel was not able to sweep the public, which does not see the West Bank and the settlements as a true part of Israel, and does not move deep into the West Bank as they have expected. Only a fraction are ideological settlers. They actually make a lot of noise and have tremendous impact on the Israeli governments and some of the Israeli media, but they do not represent the vast majority of the Israeli public, and their leadership on the ground and in the parliament are actually afraid of that, and that's why we see a lot of legislation, laws, and trying to prevent organizations like Peace Now from acting. In addition, and this is the pictures, from the disengagement from Gaza in 2005, the Israeli public did not come out in masses out to the streets to stop the disengagement. This was a withdrawal of 8,000 settlers and 25 settlements. And the Israeli public stayed at home. They understood it was the right, because there came a prime minister from the right wing and said this is what needs to be done. And so they want the situation to seem as though the Israeli public will stand on its feet to stop the evacuation of the settlements, but that is not the case, and we saw a glimpse of this in 2005. Another interesting point to understand about Israel is the social justice movement that broke out strongly in 2011. And this created a new situation in the Israeli public opinion when more and more Israelis from the middle class and lower class started to question about Israeli economy and the flow of money into wrong places, including the settlements, which they understand will never stay as part of Israel. And this mass movement, which probably is supported by 2 or more million Israelis, they're starting to question about the great money that is spent there, that it will go down the drain, and this pressure affects the parliament members of the government. And this is a very interesting map. This is the Knesset. We have 120 representatives in the Israeli parliament. And this is a voting map we made. It's based on research and some reading and, of course, understanding. It's very significant to understand the new reality in the Knesset since our last elections in 2003. That we have a majority that is most likely to be in favor of a political agreement in case the Prime Minister Netanyahu will bring such one to a vote. I'm not saying he is, we're not sure even that he will, but he has no excuse. He tells this to the Israeli public sometimes, and he tells this to a lot of diplomats. I can't do this with the parliament I have no support. But as you see, the count, because of the new Knesset parties that came into the parliament, there is no doubt that the elections have created a new reality in which there is a majority in favor of a two-state. And this is a worst-case scenario. This is a map showing only Netanyahu supporting. But we know, of course, that if he will bring, he will not be left alone, and a lot of his party members will support him. So this situation in the last election actually breaks apart the claims of the right wing that the public is against the agreement, because we see that the Israeli voted on the last elections for a much more moderate and pragmatic representative than the right wing tries to claim. So to summarize, our conclusion, despite the difficulty in peace achieving, and despite time working against us, and despite years of right-intense propaganda, a strong right-wing lobby in the Knesset and the government that is pro-settlement, our data and understanding is that the situation on the ground has not yet, and it is, the pronouncement yet is important, but it's not yet blocked the chance for a two-state solution that will end the conflict and lead to the establishment of a thriving independent Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. And as President Obama said exactly a year ago in his first visit to Israel, peace is necessary, peace is just, and peace is possible. Thank you.
I thank you for your presentation and for clearly setting out the negative and far-reaching implications for a two-state solution of Israel's settlement policy. The committee follows and appreciates information about settlements provided by your organization, Peace Now, which has always been very useful in informing UN member states and public opinion at large through our reports and statements. We also admire the courageous stand and action your organization takes to mobilize Israeli society in support of a just peace based on the two-state solution. Thank you once again.